In this next video, we will be discussing the different classification of hazards. But before proceeding, you can click on the link displayed on the screen to know more about the Philippine Hazard Profile. General classification of hazards include natural hazards and technological or man-made. As I mentioned earlier in my previous video, the UN reports that there are now 300 hazards, of which about 60% are more of technological and man-made, and the rest, or 40%, are natural hazards. The first natural hazard that we will discuss is earthquakes. And I'm sure that most of you have experienced an earthquake. Here in the Philippines, it is one of the most deadliest natural hazards. Most deaths are due to buildings being collapsed, or fires, or due to tsunami, flooding, or landslides. These are the side effects, or it can sometimes be the main effects of an earthquake. Because an earthquake can trigger a landslide, tidal waves, and tsunamis. Strongest earthquake that we've had over the last years is the 2013 earthquake of Bohol and the recent Central Luzon 1990. But the most recent is of the one last year in Maguindanao. Next, we have the tsunami, which is triggered by an earthquake. The deadliest tsunami that have happened was in the Indian Ocean from Sumatra, Indonesia in December 2004, which was caused by a 9.1 earthquake with waves as high as 50 feet and reportedly killed 230,000 in 15 countries. The biggest tsunami damage was in Japan, March 2011, caused by a 9.0 earthquake and generated waves as high as 10 meters, killing an estimate of 19,000 people. It also destroyed nuclear facilities in Japan. So a tsunami is caused by a series of waves and displacement of water. Next, again, landslides. Landslides are triggered by an earthquake or a volcanic eruption. There are so many different types of landslide, and you can see it here. One thing for sure, similar to an earthquake or a tsunami, you don't want landslides to happen in the night. There has been continuous rainfalls. We are now at our rainfall season, and there are landslides that can happen if you are beside a mountain range. There's also lava flow when there are landslides. You have to look for loose soils in your area that might be landslides. Or after a tsunami, when it hits the land, soil can loosen and there might be landslides. Next, we have the Ginsaogon landslide in southern Leyte, which buried a whole barangay with a population of 1,857, happened sometime in 2000. Volcanic hazards. As I mentioned, there's around 400 active volcanoes in the world, and in the Philippines, we have about 22 active volcanoes. And I'm sure you will know that Mayon volcano is the famous volcano in the world. And next to that is Taal volcano, which erupted just last year in December and affected in January. Typhoon. The Philippines average 20 typhoons a year, of which about 5 are strong ones. And the most famous typhoon happened in 2013, known as Typhoon Haiyan internationally, and locally, it's Typhoon Yolanda. Typhoon Yolanda spanned about 800 kilometers from southern Leyte up to northern Luzon. You could see Typhoon Yolanda almost, when it was approaching the Philippines, it was covering the whole of the Philippines. It had so strong winds of about 320 kilometers per hour and brought also big rainfall. Storm surge is triggered by a typhoon. These are incoming typhoon waves affected due to strong winds and can last be 62 kilometers per hour. The storm surge of Typhoon Yolanda was about 80 kilometers per hour, brought about by the 320 kilometer per hour winds. Does the coastline have a low elevation which could be affected by a storm surge? Mostly these are in the coastal areas. This is the effect of a storm surge in one of the areas in Tacloban or Leyte. Another, such a big boat was brought into land by a storm surge. You might ask, what is the difference between a tsunami and a storm surge? As I mentioned earlier, a tsunami is triggered by an earthquake. So there are forms of earthquake which are lateral in nature or vertical. In a vertical nature earthquake, when land falls, and this is a body of water, naturally yung tubig sasama pababa. And there will be a space created wherein the water will become a tidal wave or a tsunami. Whereas in a storm surge, if this is the sea and these are bodies of water, yung storm surge is caused by the winds above it. So kung mababa ang typhoon, you could imagine that the wind pushes water below and creates again another surge of water that becomes a storm surge. Or it's also known as a tidal wave. No? So both tsunami and storm surge creates tidal wave. No? Kaya sinasabi natin, oy, tidal wave. Or daluyon. Or higanting agos ng tubig. But a tsunami is created by an earthquake. Ang storm surge is created by a typhoon o ng isang bagyo. Okay. Malinaw sa inyo yun. The next hazard that we will discuss is floodings. What are floodings? Alam natin na nagkakaroon ng floodings or baha kung maraming ulan or maraming ibinuhos na ulan. Marami ding nagkakaroon ng baha because of flooding or overflowing of rivers. Sa coastal areas, pag tumataas ang dagat, lalo na pag high tide. Nagkakaroon naman ng urban flooding because of human-induced flooding. No? Maraming drainage ang natatambakan ng basura. So, we all know that floodings, pwedeng mangyari sa gabi, pwedeng mangyari sa umaga, and karamihan nangyayari sa mga mabababang lugar or low-lying areas. And yung tinatawag nating mga catchment areas. We all know that in 2009, almost the whole of Metro Manila experienced one of its biggest floods, the Ondoy flood. 3 months or 1 month of rain bumuhos sa loob ng 24 oras. Kahit anong flood control system na meron ka, babaha at babaha. Tiyak. With the growing number, with the large number of population, with clogs, drainage, and malay natin, hindi ko maalala kung high tide pa nun. Kung mababa yung area, malalagyan ng tubig, walang i-escapean kasi mas mataas yung dagat. So we have Ondoy. Meron din tayong nung habagat in 2012, that was in August. That was in Central Luzon. Habagat lang yun hindi typhoon. Next, kung sobra naman ng tubig, meron tayong walang tubig. Next, drought or tagtuyot. We've mostly experienced drought during El Nino, na kung saan walang ulan, mahirap ang tubig. So what are the effects of drought? Alam natin, ang drought, tagtuyot ang lupa, hirap tayo magpalaki ng mga pananim. And if ever there's a big reduction in the agricultural sector, wala tayong aanihin, walang pagkain. Apektado ang nutritional level ng mga tao. The next hazard that we will be discussed is fire or sunog. Saan ba nangyayari ang sunog? Kadalasan sa mga factories at sa mga bahay. Dahil merong electrical faulty wirings or naiwanan ng kandila, napaglaruan ng apoy, at kung ano-ano pa. The most damage-causing fire that we have recently was the Valenzuela fire, which affected the factory of sleepers and maraming namatay. But more recently, we have the Beirut explosion, which affected a radius of about 5 kilometers. Sumabog yung depo o yung bodega ng ammonium nitrate. Similarly, kung may mangyari nun sa port area dito sa Pilipinas, maapektuhan hanggang Quezon City, Mandaluyong, even parts of Rizal and Pasay. And that ends Module 2.